Boomerocity, and in this episode, we are talking to a gentleman you may have heard of, but not necessarily in the entertainment industry, at least the music industry. He is the former CEO of Activision, which, of course, is the creator of the very popular video games over the years of Call of Duty and Guitar Hero, you know, video, mildly successful video games like that. And I say that sarcastically. But when he got out of corporate America, he got into the music business, and he is an amazing songwriter. And he is going to have his album coming out next year. But we talked to him about a single that he has out now called For Real that he did as a duet and a collaboration with Aloe Black. And this is an amazing song. And we talk a lot about it. It really talks about getting away from our phones and just really kind of taking a better look at life, kind of a stop and smell the roses type of thing, which I think we all are in desperate need of. But we also talked about another song that he did with Aloe Black, and it was called, or is called, I Love Not Drinking. And we had a very fascinating conversation about that song. I think you guys will love both songs, but the main impetus of this call was to talk about For Real, which you see behind me here, and that's a single that is going to be on the new album that comes out next year. So Eric Hirshberg, you may have heard about him in corporate America, but now we're talking to him about his music career and the amazing songs he's putting together. While you're listening to this, if you don't mind, please hit like. And if you're not already a Boomerocity subscriber on this platform, please hit subscribe. It shouldn't cost you anything more, but it helps Boomerocity out tremendously. And oh, by the way, please share the interview too. So without any further ado, here's what is the first of what I hope are many more interviews to come with Eric Hirshberg. Until next time, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerocity. Take care. Hello, Eric. How you doing?
How are you, Randy?
I'm doing fantastic. I would love to steal your guitars behind you, and I don't even play.
the fun collection.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is that the extent of it, or do you have a lot more hidden away?
Got some acoustics over there, and then there's an acoustic bass upstairs.
All right. How fun. Where are you clicking in from?
Santa Monica, California. Where am I finding you?
I am in as the great Paul McCartney said, the Smoky Mountains way down south. So
love it. Tennessee?
Yeah. Sevierville, actually about a mile and a half up the road from Dollywood.
Great.
So.
Well, it's nice to be talking to you.
Likewise, not only just because of the music, but I'm kind of a business geek too. So I know about your previous life, and I spent 20 years in tech myself, not anywhere near as successful as you were, but I was in telecom and in data storage. So
gotcha.
Your story is kind of like porn for me, man. I eat it all up, So
well, you see both sides. There's not many.
Yeah.
Who can speak both languages. Yeah.
Well, the older I get, I wonder if I can speak at all, but Well, man, thank you for taking the time to meet with me, Eric. This is an honor and a thrill for me, like I said, and I've been looking forward to this for a long time, even before this opportunity came up. You've been on my radar, and I've been wanting to chat with you. So I love this single. And I guess my first question on it is, how in the world did you get Aloe Black to work with you? I know he worked on another project with you before, but how'd that relationship happen?
So it's a great story. We were both scheduled to play. We were both playing at the same conference called the Near Future Summit. And a woman named Zem Joaquin puts it on every year, and it's like a miniature TED conference, but even better. She just gets really smart people from business and tech and government and academia, and then she integrates music into the conference. And so usually there's some thematic connection between the artist or the song that's being performed and the speeches that are being given. So I was performing my song called "I Love Not Drinking" at the
I
end
love
of
that
the
song.
day, and I was coming off of a few speeches that were, on the theme of addiction and recovery and things like that. And I think her concept was, boy, we're going into the cocktail hour and it's going to be a bummer. People are going to be bummed out. And your song is on theme, but is also joyous. So, would you kind of, try to bring everybody's spirits up as we, wind up the day? And Aloe Black was the morning entertainment, and I can't remember which song he sang or what speeches he was attached to, but I think she knew that he was also a non-drinker, and she put us together on a group text and said, "Allie, you've got to hear Eric's song that he's performing later today." So I said, "Okay, I'd love to play my song for Aloe Black." So I sent him a link of it. He listened to it, and he texted back and said, "This is great. Let's talk about this." And so we met, and it was just one of those great. It could have ended right there, but it was just one of those great spontaneous rock and roll moments where I kind of went for it and said, "You want to sing it with me today?" And we had a couple hours before I went on, and so we literally went out back of the venue between a couple of air conditioning units and rehearsed it for a couple of hours, and then we
Great
got on.
acoustics, huh?
Yeah, and then we got on stage and got the whole audience singing it with us, and that's the great birth of any friendship right there. That's a great start to any relationship, particularly for two musicians. So from there we built a friendship. We hung out a few times. We actually performed that song together in another venue, and I asked him if he'd perform with me when I was releasing that album, and he took the stage with me then. So we did a few performances together, built a friendship, built our musical chemistry, and eventually decided we wanted to try to write something together. And so
Wow.
For Real was the result of that decision. And it started with a conversation about our phones, about how both of us were trying to use our phones less and use social media less, and reduce, like so many people in the world right now, just trying to reduce the divisive elements in our lives. And why am I so addicted to the bad news was part of that conversation. And we both said that'd make a great lyric. Let's write it. So we sat in this room for several hours and hammered out a first draft of For Real. That's how it came about.
Well, I was going to ask you about I love not drinking later, but since you brought it up, I'm going to
Sure.
go ahead and hit on it now. I too am a non-drinker. Alcoholism has affected different ones in my family in the
Me too.
past
Me too.
over, on both sides of the family, and a couple of deaths, well, three deaths resulted, directly from it.
Hmm.
And so I just never picked up the habit. Plus, the church world I was raised in, it was total abstinence. So that was a reinforcement as well. But
I see.
being in high tech and going to sales conferences and such, I can't tell you how many times,
You're surrounded by it.
peers, yeah, and they're trying to cram a drink in your hand, and I just go, when I tell them I don't drink, they go, "Oh, are you a
Why not?
recovering alcoholic?"
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just don't drink,
Yeah. Well, you
and
are literally the person I wrote that song for.
well, thank you for writing it for me. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure even with the levels of corporate America you were floating in and out of, that had to be a tremendous amount of pressure in those days, was it not?
Well, I only stopped drinking about 10 years ago now. And
Oh, okay.
my story is very similar to yours. I'm not an alcoholic. I had some alcoholism in the family, and it's gotten I've seen it up close. Um but for me it really just I used to drink casually. I was never really a heavy drinker. Um but it started with a kind of a I don't think it was called dry January at the time, but I just decided to take a month off and see how it felt, and I didn't miss it. And then I said, okay, well, I'll just have a drink at a special occasion every once in a while, like at a nice dinner out or something like that. And then I'd have a glass of wine, and then sure enough, I'd go to bed with a headache, wake up with bags under my eyes, miss the gym in the morning. And so I just was like, life is better without this in it. So that's when I decided to just sort of cut it out. But what you described, that sort of social pressure, was the birthplace of this song. Because what I found was when you're out with people who are drinking and you're not drinking, they really want you to be drinking with them. And there's and if they say why aren't you drinking, and your answer is not because I'm a recovering alcoholic, if it's anything other than that, the pressure continues. Oh, come on, man, we're just doing a toast. We're just doing shots. It's bad luck if you don't if you toast with water. Um, and I found that just sort of conversationally, I needed a tool in that moment, and so that sentence, "I love not drinking," was born in that moment. It wasn't born as a song lyric. It was born as an answer to the question, "Why aren't you drinking?" And when I'd say, "Because I love not drinking," and I'd do it with a smile on my face, just like that, it would stop them in their tracks. Because they'd realize, oh, this is like a positive choice. This isn't. And I started thinking more about it, and all the language around not drinking is negative language. I don't drink. I stopped drinking. I quit drinking. Um, I gave up. Quit and gave up are two of the things you teach your kids not to do.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so they're all super negative phrases. And then I started thinking about the songs surrounding. There's so many drinking songs, um, and they're celebratory and they're goofy and they're fun and they're sing-alongs. And I just thought, boy, there's no culture for us non-drinkers. And so I wanted to have all of the celebratory, communal vibe of a drinking song, just to be about not drinking. And so that's why it sort of sounds like a barroom sing-along, and has that
Yeah, yeah.
chorus. Yeah.
I recall very specifically one of my last sales conferences I went to was in Las Vegas, and in fact, it was at a talk that Kawasaki was giving,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
afterwards, I mean, I'm standing around talking to salespeople, and in comes incoming, the drinks come in, try to go to your
Right.
hand, and
Right.
I mean, they're literally trying to force it. And when
Yeah.
they finally heard me, and they said, you don't like to drink?" I said, "Well,
Right.
actually, no, I don't." And I don't feel like I'm missing anything. And finally, it was almost like they were trying to bluff me into drinking.
Right.
And then when they saw I wasn't going to budge, it was like they finally go, "Man, I respect you for that. That is so cool
Oh,
that you
that's
don't
interesting.
do it."
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a negative impact to it.
Right.
I probably had more negative impact not golfing than I did not
Me
drinking.
too. We share that in common as well. I made it through an entire career in business without learning how to golf and without drinking too much.
Think of the money
But
we saved.
I know, and the time that I had to write
Yep.
songs. Um, Aloe, though, with that song, he said something that stuck with me, which is, he has this philosophy that he wants to use music to lift people up and to bring
Yeah.
people together and to, uh, in, be a positive addition to the world and its conversations. And I'd never really thought of it through that perspective. I don't think of my music in a that kind of missionary way, but I write a lot of personal songs. Some of them are bummers, some of them are about sad topics. And that song turned a corner where it became very positive and became a sort of celebration. And so I've always, not that I'm not dogmatic about it, but with For Real, it's also some topics that are kind of heavy. And,
Mhm.
the division in the world is heavy, the addiction to the bad news and to the scrolling we all do. Those are all kind of negative topics that we could have just stayed there, and it would have still struck a chord and resonated because a lot of people could certainly relate to it. But turning that corner to, I want to break free before it breaks me, is that is that thing I learned from Aloe, about how music
Mhm.
can turn that corner and become a positive force. And so I always try to look at things through that lens. And I
What
always
was
try to learn
the
from different artists that I either work with or meet or play with. Everyone has a slightly different approach. And he was kind enough to tell me he was enjoying the songwriting I was doing, and wanted to ask me questions about my process and my lyric writing and that sort of thing. And those are the questions I asked him and learned from him.
what was the spark or the moment that you feel inspired the song itself? I mean, when you guys were starting to start crafting, so I'm talking about for real,
Yeah.
the song For Real. What was, I mean, because it sounds very both intimate,
And
personal, and universal both.
yeah.
So what was
Yeah.
the spark in the moment that kind of got that whole song rolling in your minds?
Deciding to do it. And that was different for me too, because songwriting for me is it comes when it comes. And, I have a whole mechanism of strategies for capturing whether they're melodies or lyric ideas. Like a lot of musicians I speak into the voice memos app on my phone, or I carry a journal in my bag and scribble down lyric ideas, and scribble down notes in the phone and that sort of thing. So it's very much inspiration driven most of the time. But when you're going to sit down with another artist and schedule a time, it's really different. It's like, okay, we're going to write something today. And so when we sat down in this room, it started with a conversation. And we said, what's on your mind? What have you been thinking about? What have you been talking about? What's been bothering you lately? What's been delighting you lately? And we both very quickly centered on, we were referencing a previous conversation we had um, about our phones. And that line, um, I said, I don't know why I'm so addicted to the bad news. And Ella goes, that's a good lyric. And so we just started from that and built it from there. And so, a lot of it was really different than my process, which was great because I learned a lot. Doing it on a schedule was different. Doing it with another person was different. You mentioned that it feels both intimate and sort of uh, grand at the same time. That was very intentional because one of the first conversations we had before we decided what the song was about was, what genre is this going to be in? Because we're pretty different genres. I'm more of a intimate, personal folk rock songwriter, and he's more of this big pop R&B inspired, pop artist with the scale of the production that comes with that. And I said, well, we've got to find something on the 50-yard line between the two of us. And, I brought up a couple of, you know, spirit animals of, other artists and other productions. And I'd never heard, Aloe has such a huge voice, but I'd never heard someone use him in that almost, gospel way. And so I referenced Hosier, for example, and a couple of other artists who I really admire, where it's a folk song, but the production kind of puts it on a grand scale. And so
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
we were aiming for. And so that intimate on one hand, but grand and accessible on the other was very intentional. So I'm glad that you felt that we reached that.
Positivity in a song. I, you know, I I go to a lot of concerts.
Yeah.
I hear people, and I think a lot of people feel like they have to be political from the stage.
Hmm.
And whether or not I'm in alignment with their beliefs or their politics is immaterial. For me personally, I like to go to a show to escape all that crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a woke, whether it's wokeness, whether it's going
Well said.
along to, yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I, and with Boomerocity, I set out when I first launched this thing over 16 years ago. I wanted it to be positive. I wasn't going
That's
to
great.
ambush anybody with negative questions. If they wanted to bring up some stuff negative in their life, that was one thing, but
Right.
not to, go political, go,
Hmm.
any of that kind of stuff. I wanted to be just a safe place to read, to watch when I started getting into video. And I have found that there's a good receptivity to that where people just they just want to go and relax that whole thing a little bit. Are you finding that, especially with a song like For Real, and the response to it is, am I kind of out of whack on that track,
No,
that
I
line
think
of
you're
thinking?
tapping into something really important. And I've got to be authentic on this answer. I've been political from the stage and from as a songwriter in the past. Um, my first album had a couple of political songs on them that made my feelings at that time unmistakable.
Hmm.
Um, Something changed in culture for me that made me not want to do that anymore. And it's not that I'm any less political of a person or politically minded. It's that division became the problem. And
Hmm.
so at the time when I was expressing my politics through songs, I sort of felt like we were still having a functional debate with one another. and we were still having a debate of ideas, and division wasn't yet the point. I sort of felt like people were still listening to one another in a different way and convincible. And I don't know whether it's the influence of technology. We know a lot more about these algorithms that we all live with now, and how quickly they figure out what tribe you are part of, whether that's a political tribe or, or, a religious tribe or just a philosophical point of view. They figure out what you like and dislike, and then they feed you more and more of that. And then they feed
Mm-hmm.
you things that are the opposite of that to piss you off and to get you to click, because outrage and fear are, some of the most engaging emotions. So I feel like they've had a really huge impact on our discourse with one another. And so I feel now like I don't want to contribute more to the division. Just as an artist and as a human being, I want to focus more on the things that bring us together, because I think there's a lot of them. I just don't think they get much oxygen in our current media landscape. So it's poisonous for me just on an individual level. It's bad for relationships, and I think it's bad for the world. So like I said, I just feel like my I've gone through an evolution here where I feel like I'm not as interested in focusing on the things that divide us. I'm more focused on the things that bring us together.
Well, along those lines, I had an interesting set of developments over the last couple of years that I just, I stay in touch with what's going on in the world,
Yeah,
but I watch almost no cable news.
yeah.
And I just lost my dad a month ago, and
Oh,
he was,
sorry.
thank you. He, last 2 years of his life, he had dementia or Alzheimer's. Prior to that, he would watch cable news and he would get so upset.
Yeah,
And, he's in his he was in his 80s. He died at 89. But I, I would tell him, I said, Dad, watch more Westerns and less news. Well,
watch the
two
news
years
again, you say?
ago, when he slid into this dementia, guess what? He started watching nothing but Westerns.
Wow.
Not because I told him to then, at
But
that
that's where
point.
his heart pulled him.
Yeah. And that's all he would watch. He did not watch one bit of news,
Yeah.
didn't care about it. We didn't talk about it. And, the last 2 years of his life were positive. They were very simple, very childlike. He was like a 10-year-old
Right.
boy at that
Yeah.
point. And I have to feel that maybe the nudging before his decline
Helped.
fed that drive or desire to do that. And I find that when people don't go there in a divisive way and they feed that part and they hear songs like this, and I think songs affect people's moods and their drive of what their conversation is going to be. If we pull away from the stuff that divides and listen to things that are positive, not Pollyannish, but truly
Yeah.
positive,
Yeah.
and a song like For Real and I Love Not Drinking, I think those are songs that can fuel that positive revolution in
Yeah.
society. But
Well, thanks for sharing all that. I lost my dad a few years back, and there was a similar, regression into a childlike mind for him. And for him, it was music. He was always a music lover and a musician, and had a giant record collection and big, stereo speakers, and we used to bond over that stuff. And just as he was declining, he had brain cancer, not dementia, but similar, I would
mm,
imagine, attack on his, his faculties. And yeah, I just noticed what mattered, and what mattered was beauty and
mm,
connection and, emotional resonance, and all that other stuff just fell away. And, I it's a good exercise sometimes to go back and read newspaper editorials from 100 years ago, or go back. My wife and I, the Aaron Sorkin show, The Newsroom.
yeah, yeah.
Um, we
With
love
Jeff Daniels.
yeah, we just rewatched The West Wing before that, and that was a great show, but felt like a visitor from a different, time in our lives, and we felt very differently about the West Wing and the presidency and all that, and and it was a kind of pre hyper division artifact from a time capsule. But when we watch Newsroom, something really interesting happened. You literally could have crossed out the word Tea Party and written in the word MAGA in some of his, speechifying or some of his editorials in that show. And it could have been written yesterday. Here,
Yeah.
this, it's like 15, 20-year-old show. And you could have replaced one name with another name from today, a name from and it was literally like we're having the same arguments, we're having the same disagreements. The left and right were largely divided along the same philosophical lines, slightly different, flavor, but very similar themes. And it just struck me like we've been doing this in a loop probably forever. And you can waste your life on your version of the loop. Or you can go outside and look at a cloud and look at a tree or turn on a piece of music or pick up a great book or have a great conversation or, do something more worthwhile. And I think that when you're lying on your deathbed, you'll feel better about it. So I'm not,
Absolutely.
it's a tough one for me because I also believe in being informed and being
Yeah.
politically engaged and being, trying to create the change that you want to see in civic life. I still believe in all that. It just is really lost its place in my songwriting for sure, because I just, like I said before, I don't want to add more to the division. And I feel like that's what's new. What's new is not the arguments, but the amplification to the point where we want to kill each other if we disagree.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's
Yep.
new. I've been alive over 50 years. I don't recall that for most of it. That sort of like, if you disagree with me, it'd be better off in the world if you weren't here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's happening on both sides. I feel like it's happening globally. Just sort of the degree of hyper division is unsustainable. So I just don't want to be contributing to it.
I'll share a personal story too that you might find interesting, and it's I'll abbreviate it because I know we're pressed for time, but I'd gotten into an online disagreement with a high school friend. We were on
Mm.
opposite end. They were taking shots at my guy,
Okay.
politically,
Okay. Got
president.
it. Yep.
Yeah, or a former president actually at the time.
Okay.
And we went back and forth. And I can have an acerbic wit, right? So I took some cheap shots, and it was a female friend of mine. And the next morning, I had a note waiting for me because they were on the West Coast. I was in Dallas at the time, and I had this long note from her describing how hurt
Mhm.
she was. And something just spoke to me, Eric, and it said, "You're about to lose a friend
Over this.
over a politician who doesn't even know you exist."
Yeah. Who you'll never meet.
And I I I wrote back and I said, "I am terribly sorry." I said, I've had an epiphany. I explained what happened. I said, "I haven't changed my mind on that particular subject politically, but I'm changing my approach to how I do things." And I even went by their home. I was making a trip back from Arizona and swung up. They lived in Santa Fe. I swung up there and had dinner with them.
Good for you.
And here's what's interesting. Last year, I was writing all the former presidents. I wanted to try something and just talk to them about their musical interests.
Hmm.
And my
Cool
my
project.
guy rudely, their people rudely declined me. Not
Huh.
just declined me, but rudely declined me. And I
Interesting.
thought that taught me something.
Interesting.
You know, guy doesn't know I exist,
Right.
and then later rudely turned me down. I don't get wrapped up in politicians anymore. I don't even get wrapped up into parties anymore. I vote what I feel is good for myself, my community, my family, so on and so forth. But I've just resolved, Eric. I'm going to keep things positive, and I try my best to keep politics out of the discussion because we're not going to change anybody's minds. I think circumstances change people's minds, not arguments.
Yeah.
And so we have to
And
try
and
to.
there's a, and there's now, sorry, I cut you off.
No,
Finish.
go ahead, please.
For me, what's changed is there's now this, ubiquitous industry that whose business model is keeping us arguing with one another. There's this sort of
Hmm.
industrial scale division. And
Yep.
that's what's new. The disagreements aren't new. The tribal instincts of humans aren't new. It's why we have political parties. These big tent political parties. When you look at the scope of ideologies of either one of them, it's insane. They're not speaking to one person or one point of view. They're speaking to a multitude. And so we all have a need to be in these tribes, but we didn't used to have this, kind of thing in our pocket that was constantly trying to detect and figure out, is he more about this? Is he more about this? Oh, let's see if this pisses him off. Let's see if this makes him mad. And and now we're all, it's all this kind of mass psychological experiment. We're seeing the results of it. It's been
Yeah.
decade and a half. And now the majority of the world gets its news through one of these portals. And you talked about cable news. I think that was the beginning of it, the 24-hour. Okay, now it's got to be a profit machine. We've got to figure out
And talk radio.
and talk radio.
Yep.
But now it's, with the sort of short form video and the scroll. What's next? What's next? What's next? It's constantly calibrating, your mind for maximum division and maximum outrage.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
to me, bringing it all the way back to For Real, the song's about breaking free from that.
Yeah.
The song is really, that's what I'm going to break free before it breaks me is about. What happened to you and your friend, that's it breaking you, breaking pieces of your life that actually matter. And good
Yep.
for you for pulling back from that. You broke free before it broke you. But
Yeah.
that's to
Yeah.
me the power of the idea behind the song, and hopefully why it's, resonating with people, and hopefully it'll continue to and resonate with more, is just it it's talking about something that we're all going through. And it doesn't matter which side you're on. What matters is that we're all being, driven apart, and our society's being, kind of divided in a scary way, in a dysfunctional way, by these forces that are bigger than us.
Yep.
And the only way to win is not to play, to use that old
That's
adage.
right. Stay out of the ring.
Yeah. You just have to, and you got to figure out ways to get informed in other ways without it poisoning your mind and without it poisoning your relationships.
Absolutely.
And
I
there's
forgot to.
another line. There's a there's another line in the song. You know that we can laugh and cry and disagree, and still see one another for the sisters and the brothers that we are. Disagreement. I grew up in a house where we argued at dinner every night, not in a toxic way, just arguing about ideas and having spirited debate. And I remember the first time my wife had dinner with my family, we got in the car. She wasn't my wife at the time; she was my girlfriend. But we got in the car to drive home, and she was like, "Whoa, that was intense." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You guys were like yelling at each other the whole time." I'm like, "No, we weren't. We were just having a debate. That was just how I grew up." And
Hmm.
the companies that I've worked at and run, I always had this value that it's like a loud family dinner, that we listen to
Hmm.
one each other, we disagree with each other, we debate, we believe that's where the best ideas come from, but it's always respectful, and it's always got uh, love underneath it, even though we're debating the ideas. Something tipped where for a lot of culture now, it's not a loud family dinner, it's a civil war, whether it's a literal civil war or a under one under the surface. It became tribal, and it became negative, and it became destructive, and we all have to do our part to kind of check out of that.
It's gotten more like if you're not for me, you're against me.
Yeah, yeah, as
Yeah.
opposed to,
Yeah.
wow, why do you believe that? That is the opposite of what I think. I'm curious to hear, make that
Hmm.
case for me. I can't even imagine that. And then usually, even if they don't convince you, you learn something about how someone else thinks and what's underneath it for them. And it's usually not evil. It's usually not that they're evil. It's usually that they have a different life experience, a different point of view, a different set of priorities. And you go away, at least, if not convinced, with more understanding and empathy for
Yeah.
your fellow human beings. So,
Or they may even not even know why they think it. They're just parroting a line from their
right,
group of people.
right.
Before I forget, Eric, I didn't ask you this in the beginning. I want to be respectful of your time. Are you okay on time
Sure.
right now?
Yeah.
Okay, good,
Fine.
good. Because I
Sure.
got several more questions I want to ask. But
Okay.
I agree with you, and that's. I had somebody unfriend me on Facebook because I was talking about music. They wanted to inject politics in there, and they demanded to know my stance on something or on someone. I said, not going there.
Yeah.
And they kept pushing and they demanded that statement from me. And I said, you're bullying me and I'm not going to go there. They immediately unfriended and blocked me. And I tried reaching them to have a sidebar conversation offline. Didn't even want to talk to me. I was,
Mhm.
and they
Mhm.
might have heard that I was actually a lot more closer aligned with them than they realized. And
Probably. Usually the
yeah,
case.
yep,
By the way, that's the other thing that's frustrating is I think most people agree with us.
yeah.
I think that the the two extremes, the algorithm rewards the most extreme voices because it gets the most clicks, it gets the most engagement. So it creates this very convincing illusion that that's the world, that there's a crazy faction over here versus a crazy faction over here, and that those are our choices. And in reality, I feel like most people are here between the
Mm-hmm.
two crazy extremes. And what I've found that's really given me a lot of hope and positivity is that people who I've, for most of my life, often disagreed with, we all have a lot of agreement all of a sudden. And I think there
Mm-hmm.
is this, I'm always saying to my wife, almost all of us agree about almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few fringe topics, there always have been, that we'll never agree on, probably. And those are the ones that, politics and elections turn on because they incite a lot of passion. But again, it's just a matter of emphasis and focus. What are you going to focus your energy on? It'd be very easy right now to focus all of your energy on the things that divide us because
Yep.
there's so much media dedicated to it. Um, it takes more intention and a little bit more work to focus on the things that unite us. But uh, I think that the world really is thirsty for it.
I agree. They want that positive energy, that positive mindset. And to me, I liken to your point about how we're really agreeable on most things. I think really what it boils down to, we argue Chevy and Ford, and but all agree that we want safe driving. We want, you know, ease or low cost of ownership. We want safety, and but yet we get tied up into whether it's a Chevy or a Ford or the Beatles and the Stones or
Yeah.
the Yankees or the White Sox or
Yeah.
whatever. We get to the labels instead of the actual functionality of whatever it is we're arguing about, and we lose sight of that, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, corporate America and how you made that shift from the tech world over to music. Um, do you find the music business any less cutthroat and consuming than the tech world was when you were in that?
Well, it's funny that you refer to it as the tech world. I never thought of my career as being in tech per se. I always felt like I was in the creativity industry.
Ah,
And
a
my
good
two,
point.
the two companies that I had the privilege of running were Deutsch LA, the ad agency, and Activision, the video game company. And in my mind, the common thread between those was not technology, although both had technology, as big parts of their business, but creativity. Companies that
Yeah.
sell a creative product and try to, emotionally connect with people, whether you're making a Super Bowl spot or making a war video game or a fantasy video game, you're always trying to connect with people on an emotional level and draw them into a story and into a world and into characters or into humor. And so to me, those things are very similar to, the creative process of trying to, create something that's going to resonate with people is universal, uh,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's commercial art, like, um, like a Super Bowl spot or fine art or something more something in the middle. Um, so to me, that's where I've spent my 10,000 hours is in with creative people and leading creative processes, and so that part of it feels very familiar. The record, the music industry, you know, for independent artists, I don't know that it is an industry. I think that's a little like saying, the poetry industry. I don't know that it's
Yeah.
industrial. When you have 40,000 songs a day or whatever crazy number it is now being uploaded to Spotify, this is just something that humans need to do. They need to make music, they need to write songs, they need to sing songs together. This is something that predates language for us. And so
Yeah.
I'm, you know, going to do everything I can to bring my past lives of marketing and, understanding of technology and algorithms to bear to try to get my music heard. But that's not the part that matters to me. The part that matters to me is creating something that I'm proud of and creating something that when I watch people respond to it, you get that sense that it's landing. You get the sense that it's
Yeah.
touching their heart or touching their mind or, going in on some level. And that's what drives me with this passion.
Well, to that point, did both on, let's focus on the two songs we talked about, I Love Not Drinking and For Real. What kind of fan feedback have you gotten on those songs? Were there any compelling stories you heard from those people that kind of validated everything you had hoped for? And you go, yeah, they got it, they got the message, and I did the right thing here as far as the message you were conveying in those songs.
I think getting fan feedback is one of the great thrills for me, which is a double-edged sword because, sometimes the feedback is not positive and, you
Yeah.
shouldn't spend too much time in the comment sections of any platform for your own mental health. But,
Yeah.
I've been writing songs my whole life, since I was a teenager at least. And I obviously had a whole other career that was pretty public. And as it became more and more public as a business person, I became more and more private as an artist. And maybe that was all in my head, but I always felt like, especially when I became an officer of a public company and you had an earnings call every 12 weeks, no one wants to hear your love songs. People want to know your eyes on the ball. So
Yep.
I've done this at a pretty high velocity for a lot of years for a very small community of friends and family that I would share it with. And so when that's been your artistic life for a long time, reading someone who takes the time to write a comment that says this really touched me or this song really meant something to me or this song got me through this summer and here's why, that's what it's all about. Those are the or someone comes up to you after a show. I had a great moment where two anecdotes to answer your question directly. A friend of mine who stopped drinking asked me to sing "I Love Not Drinking" at her birthday party. That
Oh,
was a cool moment, and got everyone singing along with me, and just bending the world to the idea of we're going to celebrate not drinking instead of drinking, and then watching it happen is kind of cool. And the fact that she stopped drinking and asked me to sing that song really touched me. Uh, Another one was when I was releasing my last album, Secondhand Smoke, and I had planned some performances surrounding that. I put up posts on Instagram and different social media platforms saying buy your ticket, and I got a DM from a fan whose name I didn't know his actual name, but whose handle I recognize because he's someone who comments a lot and who is very engaged with my content. And he wrote a DM that said, "Just bought my ticket," and I said, "Oh, great! Didn't know you were in LA. Wonderful. Come say hi after the show." He goes, "No, no, my plane ticket." And I said, "Whoa!" And this person, lived I think in San Luis Obispo or someplace that was a little too far to drive to get to my show in Hollywood. Bought a plane ticket, got a hotel just to come see my show. And that was a moment for, again, when you've been doing it as long as I have anonymously and sort of just playing it for your friends and your wife and your family, just to know that it's gone out there and means something to someone like that means the world. So I'm slowly but surely getting more and more of those, and hopefully reaching more and more with each track and each release, and that's a joy. Really is a thrill.
Are there any skills from the boardroom that, say, unexpectedly helped you in the studio or in your creative life?
I think that, again, business for me has always been creativity first. I almost became a CEO by accident. I became a CEO because I was a good creative and because I was good at, making things that resonated with audiences. And then I found that, I learned how to lead and I learned how to lead a company and I learned the financial parts and the technical parts, um, more out of necessity. But my primary skill that I brought to those companies was creative instincts and creative leadership and creativity. So I certainly bring that forward. But I know what you're asking. Um, I feel like the through line for me is storytelling. Whether you're talking to a board of directors or to investors or to a potential employee or to a critic, um, you're trying to tell them a story. And you've got a vision, you've got a point of view about why you're making the decisions you're making, why you're making the choices you're making, why you made the thing, whatever it is, the way you did. And I think I got really good over my corporate career at boiling complex subjects down to very understandable, quick, relatable pieces of language. Certainly, advertising did that for me, and I think that makes for a lot of good lyrics. I've got
Yep.
a lot of thoughts that sometimes I go like, "Is this a song? This feels complicated." But then, if you dig deep enough, the complexity falls away, and there's something usually pretty simple at the core. And I've gotten good at that over time. And I used to remember, like I said, talking on earnings calls. And for a long time, it was a mystifying world to me because I wasn't from finance. I wasn't a financial analyst. I wasn't, from their world. But I realized, oh, they just want to be told a story too. They're human beings and they want to believe in a vision and they want to believe that you've got a long term plan. And some of that is financial, some of that is scientific, but a lot of it is just emotion and human. And so
Yep.
everywhere I've gone, figuring out a way to tell the story in a compelling way has been one of the secrets to my success. And certainly that's true of songwriting.
Very cool. Was, a lot of people dream of pivoting out of their day jobs into doing something fun that they have a passion for, whether it's creativity or flying a plane or,
Mm-hmm.
you farming, whatever. What pushed you to finally say, "Hey, now's the time. I want to leave the boardroom and hit the stage or the studio"?
I think it's a little, I understand what you're saying. And I know a lot of people have that moment in life, where I want to, like you said, want to fly a plane or learn to do something new or rewire your life, rebalance your life. For me, it's a little different only because I was doing it the whole time. And when I say doing it the whole time, I just want to, like not at a hobby level, kind of at a
Yeah.
manic level. This has always been there for me. And, um, and I can only liken it to like, it was like a secret life. It was like I had a moment, a friend of mine, a good friend, like a real friend, not just a work friend, but someone who I really had become real personal friends with and who we knew each other and we knew each other's families and, you know, um, were real with each other, was over at my house at a business cocktail party I was having here and saw a guitar in the corner and said, "Oh, who plays music in the family?" And that was a moment where I'm like, wow, people who I'm even really close with don't know about this. And it
Mm.
sort of felt like even beyond, I don't know what to compare it to, not even like a mistress, but like, those guys you read about who have a whole second family somewhere, and like there's a whole other house that calls them dad, and it's like, that's how it felt. It felt like a whole second secret life. So look, I was lucky. I had a good career. I had the opportunity to make different choices and think about things differently. And the first thing that I wanted to do when I stepped down from being CEO was to put out an album. It was just a no-brainer. There was no question. It was not like, should I do this or should I do that? It was just, I'm getting into the studio, I'm putting it out, I'm gonna. And interestingly, it was terrifying. Once you're known publicly in one lane, it's really scary to put yourself out there publicly in a different lane.
Hmm.
And I had a whole plan. Uh, my first album was called Spare Room.
Hmm.
Um, that was originally going to be my band name, quote
Hmm.
unquote. And I had a whole plan where I was going to put my music out there under a band name because I didn't want to sort of cross the streams between my business life and my artistic life. And my wife kind of called me out on it and said, "What are you doing? Like if you can't be your whole self right now, when you don't answer to anybody, and when you're just doing this for the love of it, then you're going to die and you're going to never have done it. Like just be your whole self." And she was right because I had it all worked up in my head that people were going to hate it and that no one likes a polymath, no one's rooting for that to be successful, and no one cared. They cared if they liked the song or not, but it was all in my head. Mark Twain has a great quote that I've referenced many times since then, which is he said, "You wouldn't care so much about what other people think about you if you knew how infrequently they do."
Isn't that the truth?
And so it was a great lesson in that, where it's just like, no one's thinking about you at this level. This is all in your head. And, people from my business life who heard my album, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you wrote songs. That's cool, man." And that was it.
Hmm.
There was never this sort of mushroom cloud of hate that I was, anticipating, and, a few occasional, whatever, but whatever, at the end of the day, this is me. And okay, I don't fit neatly into a box. Cool. Like that's me. And I think it's
Hmm.
true for a lot of people. So, you know, I, 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 I think it's a little bit different than what you described, but I certainly had that moment where it's like, this feels scary. And I'm really glad that I put it out there with my name on it.
With your background in the advertising side of things and marketing, that type of thing, what part of that do you feel has really helped you do a bit better in getting your new brand out there? I mean, because let's face it, I mean,
It's
even
hard.
what I do now, I mean, when I launched this over 16 years ago, I didn't know that many people except pros on TV or on radio
Right.
that interviewed artists and, celebrities, that type of thing. Now it seems like every time I turn around, there's someone else doing it,
Yep.
or the artists I'm interviewing have their podcasts and all that.
Yep.
So there's this cacophony of sound out there, and
Yeah.
it's hard to. It's like Sam Andrew from Big Brother and the Holding Company told me. It was one of the first interviews I did. He goes, "Randy, we were sitting in a closed cafe in San Rafael," and he goes, "Randy, keep in mind when we invented this stuff."
Right.
And he goes, nobody had done it before. There were no books, there were no courses on how to
Right.
do the wah wah pedal or a fuzz sound, that kind of thing. He said, now you have schools that crank out 500 graduates a year that can do Hendrix as well
Yeah.
as Hendrix.
Yeah.
And, so now we've got, you know, each of us are like a grain of sand trying to
Yeah.
get attention
Yeah.
to our product, to our craft. How has your background in the marketing side of things helped you do a little bit better than that than maybe some of your peers or competition?
Boy, I'm glad you think that I have. Like I don't, I don't know that I don't feel like I'm in a position to give anybody advice because I feel like I'm still figuring it out. And I think what you described, there's an impossibility to this. It is playing the lotto for a living. Like there's
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
much content. And you came from a time, and I did too, when there were big barriers to entry to getting content onto a platform. There was only a
Hmm.
handful of stations. Even when, cable came out and there was 500, only 500. you know
Oh
there's
my.
there's infinite now channels on YouTube and on all these different platforms, where the barrier to entry to putting out content, whether it's music or journalistic content like what you do, or commentary or news, or it's there's no barrier to entry. So anybody who has the desire to do it can do it. And the result is, a kind of like comedically unmanageable amount of content in the world to sift through that no one can. So, there are those that break through. I don't know that even they know how that happened or that they could bottle it and tell the next person in line, here's how I did it. There's a little bit of luck. There's a little bit of the quality of the art, of course, matters. The quality of the content matters. I think that, to answer your question, I think hopefully the production value, at least, and the way that I present My stuff has benefited from all my time behind cameras and on on shoots and in edit bays through my advertising career. And I think the storytelling, like I talked about before, I think there's a story in everything. The way you do a music video, the way you do a social media post, the way you write a press release, the way you tell the story about your music or your podcast or whatever you're trying to get seen matters, of course, because you got to hook people. So I think
Yep.
maybe I have a little bit of extra skill or extra reps on those pieces of the business, but I don't feel like it's like I've got some cheat code that no one else has. It's a really hard thing to figure out.
It is. It really is. And society's attention span is so darn short,
Well, the
and
other thing is that the one thing I've noticed is, so here's an this, I don't know whether this will make you feel better or worse, but I had an Instagram reel, a short video from my last album go truly viral. You know, most of my, if you look at the view counts on my stuff, tens of thousands was really good, tens of thousands of views. Only a few got a couple 100,000 views. This one got 5.3 million views.
wow.
I have no idea why. It was a video of chorus 2 of track 7, and chorus 1 had already been out like a few weeks earlier. Same chorus, same video, same performance. And I just, sliced the song into bits, and, it was kind of my social media, person was putting them out on a cadence. And that one popped. But what's interesting is I saw no correlative value anywhere else. You would think if 5 million people had just watched this chorus, that a couple 100,000 would more than usual would be going and searching it out on Spotify. But the
Right.
Spotify chart just looked like this, just stayed utterly consistent.
Wow.
So one thing I've come to realize is that we want people to behave a certain way. We want people to see a clip of our song on Instagram, or you want people to see a clip of your podcast on Instagram. And then you want them to go leave Instagram and go find the full-length podcast. I want them to go leave Instagram and go to Spotify and listen to the whole song or buy the vinyl or whatever. But that's not what Instagram wants. Instagram wants them to stay there. That's why they make it really hard to leave. That's why they give you only one link that you have to put in your bio, and they create all this friction to get you to leave. So one of the sort of things I've had to come to peace with is I've had people say to me, I like your new song. And I go, I'm always curious. Oh, great. Where did you hear it? Where are you listening to it? Oh, on Instagram. And in my mind, I'm like, you haven't heard my song. You've heard a 30-second clip of my song. But you know what? You got to meet people where they are. And it's like, okay, if they heard a 30-second clip and they like it, that's the music world now. That's a piece of how music gets consumed. And I've just got to be comfortable with that. So these things are really separate. Each one is kind of their own animal. Succeeding on Spotify is different than succeeding on YouTube, is different than succeeding on TikTok or Instagram or wherever. And you just have to hope that the music gets out there and touches somebody. That's it.
Agreed. I think it's much like how it used to be when we turned the dials on the car radio.
Yeah. You jump
catch a
around.
clip, move on.
I liked it. Yeah.
My girlfriend's son has a very successful social media platform. That's all he does for a living now, and it's about him and his golden retriever. And he has a very good life from that. And I'm just thinking,
Wow.
And I've talked to him because, it's apples and oranges between us as far as what we do. And he's just like, he goes, Randy, he goes, people liked it. They shared it. The people that it was shared to, they shared it. He goes, now
Sometimes
it's kind
the
of at a
algorithm
plateau.
gods smile upon you, and sometimes they don't. Yeah.
And I'm convinced that the dashboard is an estimate. I think it's, this more than a lot of technology, because there's some things that just don't jive.
Yeah.
But, I do what I do for the love of it, and not
You have to.
just, we do.
And I think that's always been true. I think that was true of, whether it's your career or whatever you're pursuing before and after this technology, was in our lives. I think that part was always true. That part is consistent. You got to love what you're doing, or you're not going to be successful.
Where can people find out more about what you got going on show-wise and get your album? Can they get physical copies of your albums? Tell people where they can get more of you.
So okay, if I wrote the script, if you saw a clip on social media and Instagram, go find the album on your streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, whatever. Go find it, and not just download the album, but follow me as an artist so that you get alerted when I put out something new. It's really hard to reach people, even though we work so hard to get these social media followers, and then only a tiny percentage of them see each thing you post. So follow if you like it. If you have a record player, if you have a turntable and you like collecting physical media or CDs, I've got a website, erichirshbergmusic.com. All of my stuff's for sale there. And just follow, enjoy, and engage with the whole product, not just with the clips. That would be the best way to do it.
Any touring coming up?
Not yet to be announced, but yes, just like I did with my last album, I'm going to put out some singles first, and hopefully generate some interest in the new album, and then I'll be doing some performing. And that's another part of the world that's that I'm also trying to figure out. People used to go out to clubs to discover new music. Now they only go out to clubs to see someone they already know. So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing where you got to build the fan base to the point where you can go perform in every city. So working on that.
Well, I'll keep an eye out on that. And if you get out here to East Tennessee or somewhere within easy driving distance, let's meet up, man. I'd love to shake your hand.
According to my dashboard, Nashville is one of my top cities. So,
all right.
Performing, I'll definitely be making my way to Nashville.
Well, I'll watch for that, and I'll shoot you a note. And I'd love to meet you. I've got family there, and
please do.
And it would be great to meet you in person, Eric. And
cool.
Again, this was a thrill for me. Let's definitely talk when this album, your new album, gets close to dropping, and we'll do one of these ahead of time so we can kind of tee up the demand there. So
thank you.
All right. Well, Eric, stay safe. Have a great holiday, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
This has been another fun-filled episode of Boomerocity with your host and producer, Randy Patterson. The theme song is Roll the Dice and is recorded and used by permission from Quentin Hope. Quentin is spelled Quinten, and Hope is Hope. And you can find out more about Quentin at quentinhope.com. Post-production is done by Cardinal Sins Productions. The Boomerocity name, logo, and content is copyright protected. Segments may only be used with written permission by Boomerocity and/or its assignees. Inquiries should be directed to input@boomerocity.com. Copyright 2025.